today's lesson, students will be able to expand and simplify algebraic expressions with decimals and fractional coefficients. So I'd like you to circle the word expand. The Math and Focus, and that's the textbook that we're using, they use the word expand a lot. However, in the other textbooks, they use the word distribute. So I would like us to please understand that distribute and expand mean the same thing. So I'm going to show you two examples, and you're going to see how I get the same answer, but I'm using two different techniques. And then I'll go over why we use one technique over the other. So we're going to write down 2 parentheses 1 plus 3, and then we're going to write down the same problem. I'm going to write it in a different color though. 2 parentheses 1 plus 3. Normally we would use PEMDAS, like we did in the last chapter. And in this expression, 2 parentheses 1 plus 3, there's actually two operations. There's the parentheses, but then there's also multiplication. And multiplication is what's in between the parenthesis and the 2. So parentheses and multiplication. So technically you would do the 3 plus 1 first because it's inside the parentheses, and that would be 4. And then you bring down the 2, and then you do the 2 times 4, which is 8. But if you look at this other technique, where we're going to be kind of illustrating more today, I can also distribute that 2. Now once again, in between the 2 and the parentheses is multiplication. So I can actually distribute that 2 times to both the 1 and the 3. Once again, I'm distributing the 2 by multiplying it to both the 1 and the 3. Like when a teacher distributes a test, the teacher just doesn't give the one student the test, right? The teacher gives one test to each student. So I'm doing the same thing here. I'm not just giving the 2 to the 1, I'm giving the 2 to the 1 and then 2 to the 3 as well. And that's why I'm distributing the 2. So 2 times 1 is 2. And then 2 times 3, right? Once again, 2 times 3 is 6. Now because 2 times 3 is positive 6, I'm going to bring down the plus sign. And then 2 plus 6 is 8. The same answer as what we got before. So with these two methods, it's like, why would I use the more complicated one when I have the easier PEMDAS method? And the reason why you would use the distributing method is because of a problem like this. If I did 2 parentheses 2x plus 3, notice how I cannot do 2x plus 3. We learned this in the previous sections, right? You cannot add 2x plus 3 because they're unlike terms. And because they're unlike terms, I have to instead distribute the 2 to both terms. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to take the 2 that's outside the parentheses, and I'm going to multiply it to the 2x as well as the 3. 2 times 2x is 4x, and 2 times 3 is positive 6. Now here I cannot add 4x plus 6, so I'm done. My answer is 4x plus 6. One thing I just want to make sure you understand too, I am allowed to multiply unlike terms. That's why I am allowed to do 2 times 2x. I'm able to do it because I'm multiplying. If I'm adding or subtracting, I cannot combine unlike terms. Alright, so part A, we're going to do 3 and then 2x plus 4. Once again, I cannot combine 2x plus 4. So I have no other choice. I have to distribute the 3 to both the 2x and the 4. And when I distribute the 3, I am multiplying. I got to make sure you understand that. You're multiplying when you distribute the 3 to both terms. So 3 times 2x is 6x. That's because 3 times 2 is 6, and then I just bring on the x. Then I'm going to do 3 times 4, right? I'm not going to do this plus 4 and bring it down. No, I'm going to do 3 times 4. And 3 times 4 is 12. Because 12 is positive, I'm going to put a plus sign. And my answer is 6x plus 12. So now I'm going to bring this over here and bring this one over here so I have more room. And then we'll call it a day after this. You can do the rest on your own. So it's 2 parentheses 5x minus 1. And it's also 1/2 2x plus 4. So I'll do the one on the left first. Once again, I cannot use PEMDAS here because 5x minus 1 are unlike terms. I cannot combine them. So instead, I'm going to distribute. I'm going to distribute 2 times 5x. 2 times 5x is 10x. And then, right, I'm going to distribute the 2 to the negative 1. Yes, I'm treating this like a negative 1. That's going to help me later on when I explain part D. And 2 times negative 1 is negative, so minus 2. From there, I'm done. I cannot combine 10x minus 2. So that is my final answer. The last one here in red. This one's a little bit tricky because you have fractions. The one thing I'm going to tell you is, right, compare an apple with an apple. Convert the 2x and the 4 both into fractions. You easily do that by putting 1 underneath it. And then you just multiply. 1/2 times 2x over 1. And then you do 1/2 times 4 over 1. So we'll do this one first. 1/2 times 2x over 1. I would actually do it on the side somewhere. 1/2 times 2x over 1. The 2's cancel out, and then you just have 1 times 1x. So my answer is just 1x. Done. Then you're going to multiply the 1/2 with the positive 4 over 1. Once again, I would do that work on the side. So 1/2 times the 4 over 1. Once again, you can see how the 2's can cancel out with the 4. So 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 4 twice. and then 1 times 2 is 2. Because that 2 is positive, you're going to write plus 2. From here, 1x plus 2 are unlike terms. You cannot do anything with it, so you're done. Your answer is 1x plus 2. Distribute, but with a decimal instead of a fraction. So I'm going to take the 0.2 parentheses 4m plus 3 and bring it over here. This lesson should be a little bit quicker than part A. You would want to use PEMDAS. Unfortunately, you can't because you cannot add 4m plus 3. So instead, you're going to have to use a new technique that's called the distributing. So we're going to distribute the 0.2 to the 4m as well as the 3. Now, distributing means you're multiplying. So don't forget that you're actually multiplying and not like adding or subtracting. So I'm going to do 0.2 times 4m. Now, a quick way of doing this is just do 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So 2 times 4m would be 8m. But the only thing that you want to kind of do in the back of your head is when you do the 2, it's really 0.2. So that means you move the decimal out 1 space. So you got to move that decimal back in 1 space. So it's going to be 0.8m. We'll do it again, right? At first it sounds complicated, but the more you do this, the easier it is. So the next one is going to be 2 times 3, right? Once again, I'm doing it without the decimal. 2 times 3 is 6, and it's positive 6, right? So I'm going to write plus 6. But then, once again, when I look at the 0.2 and the 3 doesn't have a decimal. But the 0.2, you're moving the decimal 1 space out, so therefore you're moving it back 1 space. So it's really going to be 0.6. So my final answer is 0.8m plus 0.6. All right, so I'm going to bring this one here and this one here. You can do the same and split up your work. It's going to be 0.7. Now, they're called brackets, but you treat them like parentheses, so don't get nervous with this. This is no different than parentheses. So it's 0.2y minus 3. And once again, you can't use PEMDAS, right, because you can't combine unlike terms. So I'm going to distribute that 0.7 to the 0.2y. Once again, I'm just going to multiply them without the decimal at first. So it's just 7 times 2, which is 14. So it'll be 14y. But then I'm moving the decimal out 1 space here and 1 space here. So it's a total of 2 spaces. So I'm going to move the decimal back in 2 spaces. So it's going to be 0.14y. Now I'm going to do 0.7 times negative 3. Yes, negative 3. Once again, 0.7 times negative 3. A positive times a negative is a negative, so it's going to be a minus. And then 7 times 3 is 21. From here, right, the 3 doesn't have a decimal, but the 0.7, I'm moving the decimal out 1 space again. So I'm moving it back only 1 space. And my answer is going to be 0.14y minus 2.1. And I cannot combine unlike terms, so I'm done. All right, last one, and then you can move on to part C. It's 1.2, 0.2m plus 2.1. Once again, here I cannot combine unlike terms, so I cannot use PEMDAS. So instead, I'm going to distribute. I'm going to multiply 1.2 to both terms. So I'm going to do 1.2 times 0.2m. In my head, I'm really doing 12 times 2, which is 24. So it's 24m. But then I'm going to count how many spaces I move the decimal out. In this case, it's 2 spaces. So I'm moving it back in 2 spaces. Now I'm done with this. Now it's 1.2 times 2.1. And 12 times 21 is positive 252. But once again, I'm going to count the amount of spaces. I move the decimal back out and put it back in. So in this case, I move the decimal out 2 spaces, so I'm going back in only 2 spaces. My final answer is 0.24m plus 2.52. We're going to learn how to distribute or expand a negative number. So notice here, I kind of preset the page already. Notice over here, right, I took this problem and I moved it over here. Notice how the outside number is a negative number. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. So, I mean, everything else is the same. You can't use PEMDAS because, once again, you can't combine unlike terms inside the parentheses. Therefore, you have to distribute the negative 3, which means to multiply. Don't forget that means to multiply. But this time, you just got to remind yourself, a negative times a positive is a negative. So when I do negative 3 times x, right, I can give x a 1. We learned that in the previous section, right? When we do negative 3 times positive 1, it's going to be negative 3x. That's not so hard for kids to understand. It's the next one that gets a little tricky. Now you're going to do negative 3 times positive 2. Negative 3 times positive 2, right, is negative 6. So I write minus 6. Notice I did not bring down the plus sign. I changed the plus sign to a minus because my answer was a negative and not a positive. So my final answer is negative 3x minus 6. Done. Now I split the page up. Let's just go ahead and do the negative 5 parentheses y minus 2. And then the last one, which is a negative parentheses negative 0.4k minus 2.5. So let's do the blue first. So just like before, you're going to distribute the -5 to both terms. You can't do PEMDAS because they're unlike terms inside the parentheses. The y doesn't have a number, so we're going to give it a number, right? If it doesn't have a number, we always give it a 1. And -5 times +1y is -5y. Done. Now, when you do -5 times -2, right? Once again, that 2 is negative. I'm treating that minus sign like a negative. So -5 times -2 is +10. So notice I write plus 10. That even my 8th graders still get confused on. Treat a minus sign like a negative. So then when you have a negative times a negative, you know to put a plus sign and not a minus sign. My final answer is -5y plus 10. Now off to our last problem. So with this problem here, right, it looks complicated, but it's actually pretty easy. And once again, I'm admitting it looks complicated at first. You see a negative there, you're like, well, I don't even know what to do. Well, it's complicated because you're not seeing a number. But if you don't see a number, what number do you give it again? You give it a 1. So we're treating it like -1. That's it. Everything else is the same now. And we're going to multiply -1 to both terms. -1 times -0.4k. Well, think about it. Just 1 times 0.4k is 0.4k. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer is just positive 0.4k. Now when you do -1 times -2.5, right? Once again, -1 times -2.5. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive. So I'm writing plus. And then 1 times 2.5 is just 2.5. And I'm done. Part D, right? I just already prepared the page for us. We're not going to do the third example, so we're just going to do the first two, and we're done. The first example, and I wrote it down over here, is 4 parentheses 2m plus 1 close parentheses plus 3m. I want to make it very clear. Part D is just pretty much what you learned today, but combining it with what you learned in section 3.3. So you'll see what I mean in 1 second. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to distribute that 4. Once again, you're distributing it because inside the parentheses are unlike terms. So 4 times 2m is 8m, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Now I repeat, I am not doing 4 times 3m, right? That's a big no-no. The reason why you're not doing that is because the 3m is not inside the parentheses. So that 3m just comes down. That's it, right? Nothing else. Now that's technically what you learned today. Now you're going to go ahead and remember 3.3. 3.3 says that if you have like terms, you must combine them. So out of these 3 terms, yes, there's 3 terms, right? Remember splitting up your terms? Out of these 3 terms, 2 of them are like terms. 8m plus 3m are like terms. So 8m plus 3m is 11m. Gone and gone. What's left is that plus 4, and now you have no more like terms. So my final answer is 11m plus 4. Right? Last example. So with 7 minus 2, open parentheses, y plus 2. A lot of students really just want to do 7 minus 2. It's like, it's right there, I want to do it. But you're not going to do it because you're going to have to remember that technically you're still following PEMDAS. And when you do PEMDAS, right, you must multiply before you add or subtract. Meaning you have to multiply the -2 to both terms before you can do 7 minus 2. Now, notice how I said -2. Yes, that minus I'm going to treat like a negative. So I'm going to multiply -2, not +2, but -2 to both terms. So -2 times y, right, I'm going to put a 1 there. -2 times 1y is -2y. Then -2 times +2 is -4. Now I will bring down that 7. And now I have 7 minus 2y minus 4. I have 3 terms, so now I'm going to split up my terms. And out of these 3 terms, this one and this one do not have a variable attached to it. They're called constants. They're like terms because they don't have a letter attached to them. And 7 minus 4 is +3. Gone and gone. And then I can bring down the -2y